The stars burned cold in the Andorian sector as Commander Zarath Moonblade watched her people die. From the bridge of her flagship, she could see the massive shapes moving through space like hungry shadows. The Sauroch bioships were unlike anything the elves had ever faced before. Each vessel was alive, breathing, growing stronger with every battle. Zarath pressed her long fingers against the smooth surface of her command console. 3 months ago, the Elven Confederation had 1,200 ships spread across 50 worlds. Now she commanded the last 12 vessels, filled with the final survivors of her ancient race. The reptilian Sauroch Empire had swept through elven space like a plague, consuming everything in their path. "Commander, we are receiving another distress call from Silvermoon Colony," reported her communications officer, her voice trembling. The young elf's silver hair was disheveled, her usually perfect uniform wrinkled from days without rest. "How many survivors?" Zarath asked, though she already knew the answer would break her heart. "None, Commander. The bioships have finished their harvest." Zarath closed her eyes. Silvermoon Colony had been home to 3 million elves, farmers, artists, children who had never seen war. All gone. The Sauroch didn't just kill, they took. They harvested genetic material, memories, anything that could make their bioships stronger and more deadly. Ambassador Lyralee Starweaver approached the command platform. Her robes, once pristine white with golden threading, now bore the stains of battle and tears of loss. She was older than most elves, having lived over 800 years. But the weight of watching her civilization crumble had aged her beyond her years. "The Council has reached a decision," Lyralee said quietly. "We must consider options that were previously unthinkable." Zarath knew what she meant. For over 2,000 years, the elves had maintained their policy of isolation from the younger races. Humans in particular were seen as chaotic and unpredictable. Too violent, too short-lived to understand the careful balance required for civilization. The elven way was patience, planning, perfection. Every strategy was tested for decades before implementation. Every weapon was crafted over centuries to achieve harmony between function and beauty. "You want to contact the humans," Zarath said. "Our traditional methods have failed," Lyralee replied. "The Sauroch bioships adapt to everything we use against them. Our plasma cannons, our quantum torpedoes, even our most ancient magical weapons. They study our attacks for mere minutes, then become immune. We need something they cannot predict." On the main viewing screen, the sensor display showed the approaching Sauroch fleet. 37 bioships, each one the size of a small moon. Their hulls pulsed with organic rhythms, covered in what looked like scales that shifted color and texture. These weren't machines built in factories. They were grown in biological forges, bred for war across countless generations. "The nearest human vessel is the UES Defender," reported the sensor officer. "A cruiser-class ship with approximately 400 crew members." Zarath almost laughed at the absurdity. 400 humans against an empire that had consumed dozens of star systems. The Defender wasn't even a battleship, just a mid-sized exploration vessel that happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or perhaps, she thought, the right place at the right time. "Send the transmission," she ordered. Lyralee activated her personal communicator. The device was a work of art, carved from a single crystal that had taken 50 years to grow in the elven homeworld's deepest caves. Now that homeworld was nothing but dust and Sauroch biomatter. The communication channel opened, and a human voice responded immediately. It was crisp, confident, and somehow reassuring despite the dire circumstances. "This is Captain Lisa Morgan of the UES Defender. We received your distress signal, Ambassador. What's your situation?" Lyralee took a breath. She was about to do something that went against every tradition her people held sacred. "Captain Morgan, I am Ambassador Lyralee Starweaver of the Elven Confederation. We formally request military assistance against an enemy that threatens not just our people, but potentially all life in this sector." There was a pause. Zarath imagined the human captain trying to process this unprecedented request. Humans and elves had maintained diplomatic contact for over a century, but it had always been formal, distant. The elves shared their art and philosophy. The humans shared their technology and trade goods. Neither race had ever asked the other for help in war. "We'll be there in 6 hours," Captain Morgan said, without hesitation. "Send us everything you have on these Sauroch ships. Our science officer will want to analyze their capabilities." The channel closed. Zarath stared at the communication device in amazement. No committee meetings, no debate about the wisdom of intervention, no demands for political concessions. The human had simply agreed to help. 6 hours, Lyreley murmured. "Do you think one human ship can make a difference?" Before Zarath could answer, her tactical officer called out in alarm. "Commander, the Sauroch fleet has changed course. They're moving directly toward us." Estimated time to engagement: 14 hours. Zarath felt the familiar weight of command settle on her shoulders. 14 hours to live. 14 hours for 400 humans to somehow accomplish what the combined might of the Elven Confederation could not. It seemed impossible. But as she watched the stars wheel slowly past the bridge windows, she found herself hoping that human unpredictability might be exactly what they needed. The last 12 ships of her people adjusted their course, moving to meet their human allies. Behind them, the Sauroch biofleet followed like a pack of hunting beasts, confident in their inevitable victory. They had never been wrong before. The UES Defender dropped out of hyperspace exactly when Captain Lisa Morgan had promised. Zarath watched through her ship's sensors as the human vessel appeared in a flash of blue light. Compared to the graceful curves of elven ships, the Defender looked almost crude. Its hull was gray metal with visible weapon ports and sensor arrays stuck on like afterthoughts. Where elven ships flowed like works of art, the human ship looked like it had been built by engineers who cared more about function than beauty. Captain Morgan's face appeared on the communication screen. She was younger than Zarath had expected, maybe 40 years old by human standards. Her brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her uniform was crisp but not ceremonial. Behind her, Zarath could see the human bridge buzzing with activity. Crew members moved quickly between stations, calling out reports and updates in rapid succession. "Ambassador Starweaver, Commander Moonblade," Captain Morgan said with a quick nod. "We've reviewed your tactical data on the Sauroch bioships. My science officer has some questions." A new face appeared on screen. Dr. Kate Brooks was a small woman with curious eyes and hands that moved constantly as she spoke. "The adaptation rate of these bioships is incredible," she said without any formal greeting. "They're processing and countering new threats in real time. How long does it usually take them to develop immunity to a weapon?" Lyreley consulted her datapad. "Based on our encounters, approximately 3 to 4 minutes for energy weapons. Longer for physical projectiles, but they eventually develop armor plating that can deflect anything we fire at them." "Fascinating," Dr. Brooks muttered. "They're using some kind of collective intelligence network. Each ship learns from the experiences of all the others." Commander Amy Carter appeared next to the science officer. She was tall and serious, with sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "We need to see one of these encounters firsthand. Can you engage them in a limited skirmish?" Zarath felt her heart skip. "Commander Carter, we have already lost hundreds of ships attempting to fight them. Every engagement has ended in defeat." "But now you have us watching," Amy Carter replied. "We need to see their adaptation process in action. How they move, how they think, how they respond to different tactics." Captain Morgan leaned forward. "I know it's a risk, Commander Moonblade, but we can't help you fight an enemy we don't understand. One small engagement. Show us what we're really facing." Lyreley looked at Zarath with worry in her ancient eyes. The ambassador had lived through 8 centuries of careful elven planning. This human request for immediate action went against everything she had been taught about proper military strategy. But their careful planning had already failed. Perhaps it was time to try something different. "Very well," Zarath decided. "We will engage 3 of their scout ships. But if the situation becomes too dangerous, we withdraw immediately." 2 hours later, 3 elven ships moved toward a small group of Sauroch bio-vessels at the edge of the enemy fleet. Zarath commanded the engagement from her flagship while the Defender watched from a safe distance. The human ship's sensors were focused on the battle, recording every detail. The Sauroch scout ships were smaller than the massive bio-vessels in the main fleet, but they were still formidable. Each one was about the size of an elven cruiser, their hulls rippling with organic motion. Strange growths jutted from their surfaces like thorns or claws. "Begin the attack," Zarath ordered. The elven ships opened fire with their plasma cannons. Brilliant beams of blue-white energy struck the bioships, burning holes in their organic armor. For a moment, it seemed like the attack was working, but then the holes began to close. The Sauroch hulls rippled and changed, developing new layers of protection. Zarath switched to quantum torpedoes. The first few struck home, causing massive explosions across the bioship's surfaces. But by the fourth torpedo, the enemy vessels had grown new defensive structures that absorbed the quantum energy and converted it into power for their own weapons. The bioships returned fire with streams of acidic plasma that ate through elven shield systems like they were made of paper. One of Zarath's escorts took a direct hit and began venting atmosphere. She ordered the retreat, but not before watching the Sauroch ships demonstrate something that made her blood run cold. The bioships were growing. Each successful hit they had absorbed, each weapon they had adapted to, had made them larger and stronger. They were learning from the battle and becoming more dangerous with every passing minute. Incredible, Dr. Kate Brooks said over the communication channel. They're not just adapting their defenses. They're incorporating the energy and matter from your weapons into their own structure. They're literally feeding on your attacks. Back on the Defender, Amy Carter was studying the tactical recordings with intense focus. They adapt in a specific pattern, she said. First, they analyze the incoming threat. Then they develop a countermeasure. Then they integrate that countermeasure into their permanent structure. The whole process takes about 3.5 minutes. Captain Morgan joined the conversation. What if we could disrupt that process? Make them adapt so fast that they can't keep up with their own changes? Lyrelei looked confused. But how would we do that? We would need to attack them with hundreds of different weapons, all at the same time. Or, Amy Carter said with a slight smile, we could attack them with weapons that don't exist yet. Weapons we invent on the spot, faster than they can adapt. Zarath stared at the human commander. The idea was insane. Elven military doctrine was based on proven strategies refined over centuries. The thought of making up new tactics in the middle of battle went against everything she had been taught. But as she looked at the readings from the skirmish, she realized that conventional wisdom had already failed. The Sauroch bioships were designed to defeat traditional military thinking. Maybe what they needed was something that wasn't traditional at all. Dr. Brooks was already working on her theory. If we could overload their adaptation network with too many changes too quickly, we might cause a cascade failure in their collective intelligence system. It's worth a try, Captain Morgan decided. But we'll need perfect timing and coordination. And we'll need the Elven fleet to trust us completely. Lyrelei looked at Zarath. Neither of them spoke, but they both understood what the humans were proposing. They were asking the elves to abandon their ancient ways and follow a plan that would be invented as they went along. It was everything the elven people had been taught to avoid, but their people were dying. And sometimes, Zarath realized, the greatest wisdom was knowing when wisdom wasn't enough. Captain Lisa Morgan stood on the bridge of the Defender and made a decision that would have horrified any military academy instructor. She was about to throw away every rule of space combat that had ever been written. Open a ship-wide communication channel, she ordered. Amy Carter looked up from her tactical station. Captain, are you sure about this? No, Lisa replied honestly. But I'm sure that following normal procedures will get us all killed. The communication system activated, connecting her voice to every crew member on the ship. In the engine room, mechanics paused their work. In the mess hall, cooks stopped preparing meals. In the science labs, researchers looked up from their experiments. This is Captain Morgan, she announced. In approximately 8 hours, we're going to face an enemy that adapts to every weapon and tactic we use against them. Traditional military strategy has failed, so we're not going to use traditional military strategy. Lyrelei Starweaver, who was visiting the Defender's bridge, listened with growing amazement. She had expected the human captain to consult with her senior officers, review historical battles, and develop a careful plan. Instead, Lisa was asking her entire crew for ideas. I want suggestions from everyone, Lisa continued. I don't care if you're an engineer, a cook, or someone who cleans the bathrooms. If you have an idea for how to attack an enemy ship, send it to Commander Carter. No idea is too crazy. In fact, the crazier it is, the better I like it. Amy Carter activated her workstation to receive the incoming suggestions. Within minutes, her screen was flooded with messages from across the ship. Engineering suggests using the garbage disposal system to launch metal debris at high velocity, Amy read aloud. That could work, Lisa nodded. What else? The kitchen staff wants to know if we can weaponize the food synthesizers. Apparently, they can create highly acidic compounds if you override the safety protocols. Dr. Kate Brooks looked up from her science station. That's actually not a bad idea. Organic bioships might be vulnerable to certain chemical reactions. More suggestions poured in. A junior officer proposed using the ship's entertainment hologram system to create false targets. The medical team suggested releasing clouds of sedative gas. Someone from maintenance recommended using the artificial gravity generators to create crushing force fields. Zarath watched this process with fascination and horror. On an elven ship, such chaos would never be tolerated. Military. Planning was done by trained strategists who had studied warfare for decades. The idea of asking a cook for tactical advice was unthinkable. But as she listened to the human crew's suggestions, she began to understand something about their species. Humans didn't just think about problems in straight lines. They approached challenges from every possible angle, even angles that seemed impossible. We have over 200 suggestions already, Amy reported. Some of them are actually pretty clever. Lisa smiled. Good. Now here's what we're going to do. We're going to use all of them. All of them? Lyrelai asked in disbelief. Not at the same time, Lisa explained. We're going to attack with one tactic, then immediately switch to another, then another, then another, never repeating, never following a pattern. The bioships need time to adapt to each new threat. If we keep changing faster than they can process, we might overload their systems. Amy was already working on the coordination. Dr. Brooks, how long did you say their adaptation cycle takes? 3.7 seconds on average, Kate replied. They analyze the threat, develop a countermeasure, and implement it across their entire network. Then we change tactics every 3 seconds, Lisa decided. Amy, can you coordinate that kind of rapid switching? Amy Carter had been studying the list of suggestions. Her mind was already working on how to turn chaos into strategy. I can do it, but it's going to be like conducting an orchestra where every musician is playing a different song. That's exactly what we want, Lisa said. The Sarok expect us to follow logical patterns, so we're going to be completely illogical. She turned to address the Elven ambassador. Lyrelai, I need you to prepare your fleet for something they've never seen before. We're going to coordinate with your ships, but you'll need to be ready to follow our lead without questioning orders. Lyrelai felt her stomach tighten. Captain, our commanders have centuries of experience. Asking them to follow random orders from crazy humans? Lisa finished with a grin. Yeah, I know how that sounds. But your centuries of experience got you down to 12 ships. Maybe it's time to try something that has never been done before. Dr. Brooks was working on her analysis of the Sarok adaptation network. I think I understand how their collective intelligence works, she said. Each bioship is connected to all the others. When one learns something new, they all learn it, instantly. But that also means if one gets confused, they all get confused. Like a computer virus, Amy added. If we can introduce enough chaos into their network, we might cause it to crash. Lisa looked at the tactical display showing the approaching Sarok fleet. 37 massive bioships, each one capable of destroying entire worlds. Against them, 1 human ship and 12 elven vessels. The odds were impossible, but humans had never been good at accepting impossible odds. Signal the elven fleet, Lisa ordered. Tell them we're implementing Protocol Chaos in T-minus 6 hours. Protocol Chaos isn't a real military protocol, Amy pointed out. It is now, Lisa replied. Send the crew the final tactical plan. Every station needs to be ready to switch between multiple attack modes on my signal. And Amy? Yes, Captain. Make sure you include the garbage disposal and the food synthesizers. If we're going to save 2 civilizations with random tactics, we might as well do it properly. Lyrelai looked around the human bridge and saw something she had never witnessed in 8 centuries of life. She saw intelligent beings preparing for war, not with fear or grim determination, but with excitement and anticipation. They were actually looking forward to trying something that had never been attempted before. For the first time since the war began, she allowed herself to hope. Maybe the humans were right. Maybe the key to defeating an enemy that could adapt to anything was to become something that couldn't be adapted to. Something that didn't follow any rules because it was making up new rules every few seconds. The countdown to battle continued, and across the Defender, 400 humans prepared to fight an impossible war with weapons that didn't exist yet and tactics that would be invented in real time. The Sauroch biofleet approached like a wall of living death. Admiral Kexara stood in the neural chamber of her flagship, her reptilian form connected to the collective consciousness that controlled all 37 bioships. Through thousands of organic sensors, she could feel the pulse of space around them, taste the fear of the fleeing prey species ahead. The Elven fleet was exactly what she had expected, 12 ships arranging themselves in a traditional defensive formation, their weapons charging in predictable patterns. Her bioships had already adapted to Elven technology months ago. This would be another easy harvest. But there was something else. A single vessel breaking away from the Elven formation, accelerating directly toward her fleet. The bioship's sensors analyzed it quickly. Human construction, mid-sized cruiser, minimal armament compared to the massive biovessels. Ignore the human ship, Kexara commanded through the neural link. It poses no significant threat, but as the UES Defender closed the distance, something began to feel wrong. The ship's approach vector kept changing. First it aimed for the center of the biofleet, then suddenly shifted toward the left flank, then dove below the formation entirely. The bioship's targeting systems couldn't lock onto a ship that refused to follow a predictable course. On the Defender's bridge, Captain Lisa Morgan watched the tactical display with satisfaction. Phase 1 is working. Their targeting systems are having trouble with our random approach pattern. Amy Carter was coordinating the chaos from her station. She had divided the ship's functions into dozens of separate systems, each one ready to be weaponized in ways their designers had never intended. All stations report ready, Captain. We can maintain random tactical shifts for approximately 47 minutes before systems start overheating. That should be enough, Lisa replied. Amy, begin protocol chaos. All crews, implement tactical randomization pattern Alpha. What happened next would have been impossible to predict, because it had never been tried before. The Defender fired its main weapons at the nearest bioship, but only for 2.8 seconds. Then it immediately switched to launching chunks of processed garbage from the waste disposal system at high velocity. The metal debris struck the bioship's hull just as its adaptation network was beginning to counter the energy weapons. The bioship started to develop armor plating to deflect the projectiles, but by then the Defender had switched again. This time it was using the food synthesizers to create clouds of acidic compounds that ate through the newly formed armor. The bioship's network tried to adapt by neutralizing the acid, but the humans had already moved on to their next impossible tactic. Dr. Kate Brooks was monitoring the Sauroch response from her science station. "It's working," she called out. "Their adaptation cycle is falling behind our tactical changes." Amy Carter announced the next phase. Pattern Beta 7 Fish. Somehow, every crew member knew this meant using the water recycling system to launch ice projectiles while simultaneously broadcasting ancient human rock music at frequencies that disrupted the Sauroch neural connections. Admiral Kexara felt the first stirrings of confusion through the collective network. Her bioships were trying to process and counter attacks that made no logical sense. How could a species weaponize their garbage disposal? Why were they broadcasting primitive sound patterns during combat? What possible military advantage could there be in launching frozen water? But the attacks were working. The lead bioship was taking damage faster than it could adapt. Each time it developed a defense against one human tactic, they had already switched to something completely different. "Focus all ships on the human vessel," Kexara ordered. "Destroy it immediately." 37 bioships turned their weapons toward the Defender. Streams of acidic plasma and bioelectric discharges filled the space around the human ship. But the Defender was no longer where their targeting systems said it should be. Lisa Morgan had implemented the most chaotic aspect of her plan. The Defender was now piloting itself using random number generators. Every few seconds, the ship would suddenly change direction based on mathematical calculations that no biological mind could predict. The bioship's sensors could track the ship, but they couldn't anticipate where it would go next because the ship itself didn't know where it would go next. "Phase 3, Amy announced. "Maximum randomization protocol." Now every single crew member was authorized to implement any tactic they could think of. The results were devastating to the Sauroch collective intelligence. The engineering team used the artificial gravity generators to create crushing gravity wells around enemy ships. The medical staff began broadcasting sedative chemicals through the communications array. Someone in maintenance figured out how to turn the navigation deflectors into a weapon that fired bursts of pure probability mathematics. Lyrelei Starweaver, watching from the Defender's bridge, saw something that challenged everything she thought. She knew about warfare. The humans weren't following any strategy she could recognize, but they were winning. Each impossible tactic was more effective than traditional weapons because the bioships couldn't adapt to something that had never existed before. "Now," Lisa commanded. "Signal the Elven fleet. Coordinate attack pattern. Amy, what should we call this one?" "Surprise Party Delta," Amy replied without hesitation. The Elven ships, inspired by the humans' success, began their own assault, but instead of their usual careful, planned attacks, they followed the Defender's lead. Zarath found herself ordering tactics she was inventing on the spot, combining Elven magical abilities with human unpredictability. The bioship's collective network began to show signs of severe strain. They were trying to adapt to dozens of different threats simultaneously, processing attacks that violated every known principle of space combat. Their neural connections started overloading as they attempted to find patterns in pure chaos. Dr. Brooks detected the cascade failures beginning to spread through the Sauroch fleet. "Captain, their network is destabilizing. The bioships are starting to interfere with each other's adaptation processes." Admiral Kexara felt her perfect fleet beginning to fall apart around her. The bioships that had conquered dozens of star systems were helpless against an enemy that refused to make sense. Her collective consciousness, designed to share knowledge and adapt instantly to any threat, was tearing itself apart, trying to understand tactics that had no logical foundation. For the first time in her long military career, the admiral who had never known defeat found herself facing an enemy she could not comprehend. The humans weren't just unpredictable, they were aggressively, deliberately, joyfully chaotic, and chaos, she was learning, was the one thing that perfect adaptation could not overcome. The moment Admiral Kexara realized her fleet was doomed came when her bioships began attacking each other. The collective neural network, overwhelmed by trying to process hundreds of impossible human tactics, had started sending conflicting signals to different vessels. One bioship would develop armor to defend against gravity weapons, just as another bioship fired gravity weapons to counter human ice projectiles. Captain Lisa Morgan watched the chaos spreading through the enemy fleet with grim satisfaction. "Amy, how many different tactics have we used so far?" Commander Carter checked her tactical log. 437 unique attack patterns in the last 26 minutes. We've weaponized everything from the coffee makers to the toilet, flushing systems. Dr. Kate Brooks looked up from her science station with amazement in her voice. "Captain, the bioship's adaptation network is in complete collapse. They're trying to counter threats that don't exist while ignoring the actual attacks hitting them." Through the bridge windows, they could see the massive Sauroch bioships beginning to power down their weapon systems. Not because they were destroyed, but because their own neural networks were shutting down to prevent total system failure. The collective intelligence that had made them unstoppable was now their greatest weakness. Lyrelei Starweaver stood beside, the captain's chair, watching the impossible victory unfold. In 8 centuries of life, she had never seen anything like this. The humans had defeated a superior enemy, not through better technology or superior numbers, but by refusing to fight the way anyone expected them to fight. "Signal Commander Moonblade," Lisa ordered. "Tell her to begin the final assault. The bioships can't adapt to coordinated attacks anymore." Zarath received the message on her flagship and felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. The 12 remaining Elven ships moved into attack formation, but this time they weren't following ancient battle plans. They were improvising, using the humans' example to create their own unpredictable tactics. Elven plasma cannons fired in random bursts, while magical energy weapons targeted systems that bioships had never encountered before. The combination of traditional Elven precision with human-inspired chaos proved devastating. Bioships that had seemed invincible just hours before began exploding as their overloaded systems finally collapsed completely. Admiral Kexara, connected to the failing neural network, felt the death of each bioship like a physical blow. Her perfect fleet, bred over generations to be the ultimate adaptive predators, was being destroyed by an enemy that embraced imperfection as a weapon. "How is this possible?" she demanded through the neural link. "They have no training, no discipline, no coherent strategy." Her tactical officers, those few who remained conscious as the network collapsed around them, had no answers. The humans had violated every principle of warfare the Sauroch understood. They had turned their own weaknesses into strengths, and their chaos into victory. On the Defender, Amy Carter was coordinating the final phases of their impossible battle plan. All Elven ships report successful engagement. The bioships are no longer adapting to our attacks. "Because they can't," Dr. Brooks explained. "We've essentially given their collective intelligence a mental breakdown. They're so busy trying to process all the different threats we've shown them that they can't focus on any single one." Lisa Morgan activated the communication channel to address both the human crew and the Elven fleet. "This is Captain Morgan. The Sauroch adaptation network has collapsed. All ships, switch to maximum firepower. End this." What followed was not so much a battle as an execution. The bioships, robbed of their greatest advantage, proved to be surprisingly vulnerable to conventional weapons. Without their ability to adapt and evolve, they were just large targets with powerful weapons. The combined human-elven force systematically destroyed the entire Sauroch fleet. Admiral Kexara's flagship was the last to fall. As her bioship systems failed around her, she managed to send one final transmission to the human vessel that had orchestrated her defeat. "Human Captain," her voice crackled through the communication system. "You have accomplished something impossible. My people have conquered dozens of civilizations, but we have never faced an enemy like you." Lisa Morgan responded with characteristic human directness. "Admiral, your mistake was thinking that perfect adaptation was unbeatable. But there's one thing that perfect systems can't handle: complete chaos. You tried to create the ultimate predator, but you forgot that sometimes the best defense is having no defense at all." The transmission ended as Kexara's flagship finally succumbed to Elven fire. The Sauroch biofleet, which had seemed unstoppable just hours before, was now nothing but debris floating in space. In the aftermath, Ambassador Lirelai Starweaver formally requested an emergency session of the Elven High Council. For the first time in their history, the elves would vote to enter into a permanent military alliance with another species. "Captain Morgan," she said, as they watched the last Sauroch bioship explode in the distance. "My people have spent millennia perfecting our approach to warfare. We studied every possible scenario, planned for every contingency, refined our tactics over centuries of careful development." "And?" Lisa prompted. "And you spent 47 minutes making it up as you went." "Along," Lirelai finished with something that might have been a laugh. "Perhaps we have been approaching the concept of perfection from the wrong direction." Dr. Kate Brooks was already analyzing the disabled Sauroch technology floating in space around them. "Captain, this bioship technology could revolutionize our understanding of adaptive systems. But more importantly, we've learned something about the nature of intelligence itself." "What's that?" Amy Carter asked. "That sometimes the smartest thing you can do is be completely unpredictable. The Sauroch created a collective intelligence that could adapt to any logical threat, but they never considered that logic itself might be the weakness." Zarath's voice came through the communication system. "Captain Morgan, the Elven Confederation formally requests that you accept command of our joint fleet as we advance into Sauroch space. There are other species enslaved by the Empire who need liberation." Lisa looked around her bridge at the crew that had just accomplished the impossible. "What do you think, people? Should we go free some more civilizations using garbage disposal systems and elevator music?" The response was immediate and enthusiastic. The crew of the Defender had discovered something that would change the nature of warfare throughout the galaxy. They had learned that the best way to defeat a perfect enemy was to be perfectly imperfect. As the combined human-elven fleet set course for Sauroch space, Captain Lisa Morgan made a note in her log. "Personal observation. Apparently the key to interstellar military success is convincing your enemies that you have absolutely no idea what you're doing. Mission accomplished." Behind them, The debris of the once mighty Sauroch biofleet drifted in space, a monument to the danger of assuming that chaos could never defeat order. The humans had proven that sometimes the most powerful weapon in the universe was the simple refusal to follow any rules at all.